As we've been reporting, Trump seemed to make it clear during the course of that address, at least for now, on another big issue, that he has no intention to use force in Greenland. But he's still unrelenting in his efforts to acquire it. And at several points during the course of those remarks today at the World Economic Forum, he tried to present the U.S. control of Greenland as a necessity. He suggested European countries, including NATO members, are failing to protect the Arctic island.
We want strong allies, not seriously weakened ones. We want Europe to be strong. Ultimately, these are matters of national security, and perhaps no current issue makes the situation more clear than what's currently going on with Greenland. I have tremendous respect for both the people of Greenland and the people of Denmark, tremendous respect. But every NATO ally has an obligation to be able to defend their own territory. And the fact is, no nation or group of nations is in any position to be able to secure Greenland other than the United States.
So let's dig deeper into these comments by the U.S. president. For that, we've reached Anders Vistisen, a Danish member of the European Parliament in Strasbourg, France. Thank you so much for making time for us today.
No problem.
So you were listening in to the U.S. president's remarks today in Davos, saying that he will not be using at least military force when it comes to taking control of Greenland, but the conversations are ongoing. What did you make of what he had to say?
Basically, I think the president's bluff was called. He's not going to put the military option on the table. And it frankly shows that he had a quite weak hand to begin with. The Congress wouldn't stand for that kind of bullying. And now we're in a situation where all that's left is false rhetoric and basically a lot of lies about the Arctic area in Greenland.
To that end, though, we did hear the U.S. president say we're asking for Greenland. He called it a piece of ice. We would be grateful if they would give it to us. They could say yes, and we'd be appreciative, he says, or they could say no, and we will remember. What did that indicate to you when you heard that?
It indicates that the president is stuck high up a tree and have a difficult time climbing down that tree again, and that the only right way to tackle Trump is what we have recommended the Danish government to do, simply to give a stern and firm no to this kind of negotiation tactics and see how it played out. And for the moment, it's going our way. We have had now the president excluding the military option, and frankly, then there's not really much left other than empty rhetoric and a president that could not deliver on why he should have Greenland and what he needs that for.
What role do you think those military exercises that we know, allies are participating in along Greenland, what role do you think that perhaps played in what we heard from the U.S. president?
I think it was a nice gesture from our primary European allies to send troops to Greenland. Of course, it was not on the ground going to prevent a military intervention if the Americans have wanted that. But I think it's more or less the checks and balances of the American system that is going to pull the president away from his crazy thoughts. But it's always nice to have strong support, and we are very glad to see Nordic countries, Germany, Great Britain and others joining us in Greenland and showing clear signals to the president.
To that end, of course, we had Canada's Prime Minister, Mark Carney, was speaking yesterday to the World Economic Forum in Davos. And in his speech, he did say that Canada stands firmly with Greenland and Denmark and supports, quote, their unique right to determine Greenland's future. He did also say that our commitment to Article 5 is unwavering, speaking of the NATO alliance. How important is support like that, or the remarks from Canada's Prime Minister? And what was the reaction to that on the ground?
They were certainly noted in Denmark quite a lot, and I think everyone appreciates that Canada is a very friendly and long-standing ally of Denmark in NATO. So we're very happy to see the Prime Minister's remarks. But I think just as equally important actually was his statements that we should not be naive and not believe that the rule-based order will prevail against greater powers. So we should prepare for a world where we are able to defend ourselves without relying too heavily on American intervention. I think we can see what's going on in Ukraine now as a preamble for that. To be honest, if the American president was so occupied with how to counter Russian aggression or a Russian focus on the Arctic, he could just help Ukraine to focus more troops in that region instead of freeing them up to do all kinds of stuff around the NATO borders and in the Arctic region.
You know, despite the fact that today, this morning, a few hours ago, we did hear the U.S. president say that he does not have the intention of using military force in order to take on Greenland, we also know that this is a president who has a pattern of changing his mind on certain issues and of also leading to great change within these sort of structures. We know that foreign policy has shifted, geopolitics has shifted because of the approach that we've seen the U.S. president take on a number of fronts. So to that end, I wonder what sort of deeper change this could bring about within Greenland and Denmark.
The immediate reaction has been that the Greenlandic independence movement has begun to think twice whether it's a wise thing to stand alone in this world. I think that many Greenlanders now see that there is a value attached to be a part of the kingdom, still being, of course, an autonomous, self-governing area of that kingdom, and that the Danish societal model maybe fit them better than the American one. I would say the greater long-term impact is the erosion of the trust of NATO as a defensive alliance. That was the structure that kept us safe during the Cold War, that there was a strong belief from our adversaries in the Soviet Union that we would stand firm and together in a reaction for any kind of military attempt or attack on NATO. And as long as the American president is handling NATO in this way, it becomes less and less credible. And therefore, other members of the alliance have to step up, and we have to increase the cooperation between the countries in NATO who are most concerned with the threat of Russia, but also economically are able to more than surpass and counter any Russian threat if we take our security seriously.
Finally, I wanted to ask you, we're heard that the United States doesn't intend at this stage to use military force, but economic force was not necessarily taken off the table in the form of tariffs. And we did hear the U.S. president say that he is going to have ongoing discussions, negotiations with individuals to talk about continuing this quest to acquire Greenland. So to that end, what impact do you think that tariffs might have on these nations and the use of economic force? How powerful might that be?
It can be quite powerful if we don't man up from the European side and use our economy as a leverage in these negotiations. To be frank, I was very critical towards the Ursula von der Leyen deal that was struck with Donald Trump in Scotland, giving 15% tariffs on goods from Europe and demanding investment in the US just to get a customs deal with the president that he clearly doesn't honor, because now he threatens to put extra customs fees on European goods. And I think we need to be very serious about that. We have some things that we can counter back on, especially the export of services from US to Europe is very significant. And we have some critical elements in the American production lines that we could also put into play to counter these threats from Trump. But I think the lesson here is that we need to stand more firm, more self-assured, and not believe you can make deals with Trump or call him daddy or just give in whenever he gets a whimsy.
Anders, I want to thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me on.
That is Anders Vistisen. He is a Danish member of the European Parliament, and he joined us today from France.